walking where we're walking because of no fault of our own, unforeseen circumstances. This is the path that has fallen to me. Bad choices, perhaps, or are we trying to get somewhere in particular, and this is the path that takes us there? Hi, this is Barry Phillips with 10-Minute Torah, the first day of a new book, Bamidbar, or Numbers. If we go with the theme of Numbers, then we're looking at simply counting people and the things that are listed numerically. The Hebrew word here, Bamidbar, meaning in the wilderness, gives us a broader and better understanding of what this book entails. It's about Israel's journey through the wilderness. Here's what I have taken to be a true statement. If I am not trying to get somewhere on purpose, then I will get somewhere else by default. Say that again. If I'm not trying to get somewhere on purpose, I'll get somewhere else by default. So we open up this book in verse number 1, and it says, "And Yahweh spoke to Moshe Bamidbar in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of appointment on the first day to the second new moon in the second year after they come out of the land of Mitzrayim." So this opening statement gives us a time stamp. They're in their second year. They are in the second month of their second year. And this is the very first day. The tabernacle is newly set up. It's newly functional. And Yah is immediately beginning to speak to Moshe, not from the top of Mount Sinai, but from over the mercy seat, the lid of atonement on the Ark of the Covenant. His voice is emanating from the revelation of Yeshua as displayed in the tabernacle. And again, everything, every color, every thread, every board, every piece of precious metal and tapestries, they're all revelations of Yeshua. So as we hear this word in Hebrew, it is Vayidabar, Dabar, the word, Yahweh El Moshe Bamidbar, Sinai Ba'ohel Moed. Twice there is this phrasing or the use of the word Dabar. And Yahweh spoke, and then in the word Midbar, which means wilderness, it is a word that contains another word, Dabar. In other words, there is a word in the wilderness. Dabar means word. I heard a man tell a story many years ago of how that he was with a company of 2 or 3 other men with a guide in the wilderness of Israel down in the Negev. If you've not been to the Negev, it's a very hot, arid, desolate place. And the guide on a particular day gave them a jug of water and sent each of them in a different direction and said, go about a half a day's journey and just walk. Be careful, but just walk until you're isolated. And then be sure you return before nightfall. But the idea was to give them so great a degree of isolation that they would hear nothing, no traffic, no wildlife, nothing. And the man related how that when he got out there alone, completely alone, that he could audibly hear his own heartbeat. And it was there in the quietness that he began to seek Yah's face and try to hear from him. Such was the lifestyle, oftentimes, of the prophets. They cried out to Yah in isolation and quietness. Too often you and I are surrounded by a chaotic, confusing situation we call normal society. And it's hard to hear his voice. It dawned on me some number of years ago as well when I suddenly found myself picking up in the middle of a conversation that Yah was having with me, realizing I had not listened to the first part of the conversation. So when I tuned into his voice, he was already speaking. It's like arriving late at a very important delivery of speech, a very important sermon perhaps, and trying to quickly surmise what might have already been said so that you can come up to speed in the middle of the thing. What my realization was, Yah is speaking. He's consistently speaking to us. The question is, are we listening? We may be failing to listen because we have too many other voices competing for our attention and for our hearing. And so I want to introduce to you then the book of Isaiah, chapter number 5, in regard to this. Let's begin reading with verse 13. Therefore my people have gone into exile because they have no knowledge, and their esteemed men are starved, and their crowd dried up with thirst. Therefore Sheol has made itself wide and opened its mouth without law, their splendor and their crowd and their uproar, and he who is exulting within her shall go down into it. The context of this is Yah says, I planted Israel as a good vine that should have produced good fruit, and they failed to do anything but produce that which was rotten. And what more could I have done? And so all of the clamor and the role playing of being Israel, they're failing to meet Yah's desired fruit bearing and goals. Therefore, he's given them up to a bunch of noise. And he says, a man is bowed down and mortal man is humbled, and the eyes of the proud are humbled. But Yahweh of hosts is exalted in judgment, and the set apart El is set apart in righteousness. And the lambs shall feed in their pasture, and their strangers shall eat in the waste places of the fat ones. And that word pasture there is another form of the word davar. If you would read Micah chapter 2, verse 12 and 13, again, the word pasture is the word davar. Different vowel markings, pronounced differently, but similar word. In other words, where the noisome speeches are, where all of the social media and all of the verbiage of people's anger and confusion is being hurled at us. In the middle of all of that, there is an humbling taking place. And there are places now that are built up and thought highly esteemed that will become vacated and desolate. And Yah says, in that wilderness-like result, sheep will just come and they will begin to feed. Sheep being us. Here's a question. If we go to the book of Ezekiel, chapter 20, and verse 33 through 38, I encourage you to read it. Ezekiel 20, 33 through 38. Yah says, I'm going to bring you back out in the wilderness, and I'm going to deal with you, make you pass under the rod, and purge the rebels from among you. I don't know whether you and I are going to go to Mount Sinai and be in that wilderness again or not before we go into the land. That's been taught. It's plausible. It's something to think about. Or whether this current world environment of confusion and chaos, discouragement, fear, whether this is a wilderness-like experience. Yah is proving us. But just as it was for Israel as they were in the middle of this vast wasteland, the word of Yah spoke to them and gave them clear directions. Yah is speaking to us. Our question is, are we listening? Are we on this path in the wilderness because of no fault of our own, unforeseen circumstances, a bad choice? Because this is certainly not the road we would have chosen, but it could be that this is the road Yah has chosen for us. And so Yah is leading us in a path that will bring us to himself. That we must trust in, and that we must listen for it, for the directions to know where to step next. We'll continue our thoughts tomorrow. Until then, shalom.